Yo, what's up guys? Chase the Bro here, and welcome back to another Elden Ring update video. Today we're going to be taking a look at all the changes made in patch 1.13, and from what I've seen so far, they're all pretty good changes. I also took the time to test out a lot of these changes in-game with our friend Lost, so you're going to see lots of clips showcasing what we're talking about here. Starting off, they increased the poise damage of normal attacks for the following weapon types. We have the Light Greatsword, which I'm really excited about. It had really low poise damage. It was really hard to aggress enemies knowing they can just tank through you. Now the light attack actually stuns. Pretty good change there. Next up, we have the backhand blades, and I was afraid they might get a poise damage buff. Honestly, they're pretty strong as it is, but now they have a few guaranteed ways to poise break you. The crouch light attack poise breaks a full bull goat. The light attack will poise break on the second attack of it, but they come out very quickly, so it's going to be pretty easy to get that off. And with the running heavy, you can poise the initial hit, but the follow-up comes out so quickly, you'll often find yourself getting poise broken. Next up, we have the hand-to-hand arts, which honestly really needed it. They had really low poise damage and still kind of do with certain attacks. The light isn't the best. The neutral heavy attack doesn't instant poise break on the first hit, but the second one does. That's going to be kind of easy to avoid though, although the running heavy and the jump heavy attack actually do combo into their follow-up hit, and the first hit does poise break, giving it a few instant poise break options. The Beast Claws also received a poise buff, although you can still poise through the initial light attack with the 133 poise. I'm going to have to look at their data eventually to see their exact poise amount, but as it stands you can poise it rather easily it seems. They also increased poise damage of dual attacks for the following weapon types. We have straight swords, thrusting swords, curved swords, katanas, spears, whips, fists, and claws. Now I did test a variety of these out, and any attack that is staggered like the katanas, the thrusting swords, the fists, the claws, they don't seem to stagger in the one initial hit of the dual attack, but the ones that attack at the same time like the straight swords and the spears do break 133 poise. Honestly, a pretty powerful change for each of those classes. Even though some of them don't instantly poise break with their neutral L1, they do have options like the katanas with the crouch L1, so really any attack that seems to attack at the exact same time with both weapons seems to poise break. Next up, they increased the poise damage of the Claws of Night throwing attacks. It doesn't seem to poise break though, no matter how many I hit Lost with when he has 133 poise, so it's not really that significant. You're not going to be poise breaking a lot of enemies. They also decreased the invulnerability window when the Fine Crucible Feather Talisman or a Talisman of all Crucibles are equipped, so when you're doing your backstep you now have less iframes. But I was able to dodge pretty easily when Lost was trying to hit me with the Milady, which is pretty quick, so you can definitely still reaction dodge by backstepping with this talisman. The Savage Lion's Claw Ash of War received some changes as well. Apparently the second hit of the follow-up attack is now easier to land, so maybe it has a better hitbox, but they decreased the damage animation on the first attack against other players, meaning the initial stun on the Ash of War no longer combos into the second hit, although the second into the third hit does still true combo. The Raging Beast Ash of War received a nerf to its invulnerability window against other players, although I was still pretty easily able to react dodge using it against Lost attacks. Blind Spot also received a nerf to its invulnerability window, although I'm still really easily able to dodge any attack Lost throws at me and reaction punish it with the Ash of War. Palm Blast also received a nerf to its poise, although I'm still able to tank 2 hits of a Colossal, so I imagine you can't just sit there and tank anything in existence anymore, but it's still going to be very useful. These patch notes are weird because they have a few different spell and incantation sections, and there's only 2 in this first section. So we have Miriam's Vanishing, which got a decrease in invulnerability window against other players. I didn't really use that a lot on my own, so I couldn't say how much of a nerf it received. I'm going to have to test that further in the future. Knight's Lightning Spear also got an increase to its attack power of the initial Lightning Spear, but it decreased the attack power of the spear launched after the first one, and decreased the poise damage of all spears generated by this spell. That's very nice. I do want magic to do less poise damage because you do just get stunned in teams constantly by magic. It already does really good damage. I feel like having lower poise damage is fine. They also have a general balance adjustment section. None of this really involves anything in PvP. They increased the damage animation of the Light Greatsword charge attack against enemies, but not against other players, so not PvP involved. They increased the stats and status of the following NPCs that can be summoned in some areas. They increased the attack power and damage negation of summoned spirits, excluding the Mimic tier, when the Revered Spirit Ash Blessing is at 5 or more, and they increased the attack power and damage negation of summoned spirits, excluding the Mimic tier, when upgrading to +8 or higher. They really don't want to buff the Mimic tier. Now we're moving on to the changes made to specific weapons, and we're going to be starting with they increased the attack power when upgrading the following armaments: repeating crossbow, spread crossbow, and Rabus cannon. They all just get better power scaling now. The Shield of Night received a buff though. They increased the damage negation when blocking physical attacks. That's pretty nice. The Euphoria received a buff, which is nice. I haven't actually made a build centered around the Euphoria yet, but I definitely plan to now. So they increase the holy damage when the weapon has its luster restored, which is when you attack consecutively with it and it gets its buff. They also decrease the number of attacks required to restore the weapon's luster, so now it's going to get that buff faster, and it increased the duration of the luster restoration's effect, so it's going to last longer. So now you can play aggressive, get it buffed, it's going to be stronger and last longer. The Golden Lion Shield received a guard strength increase, which is nice because it's a medium shield. I'm always in favor of medium shields doing better. For the Golem Fist, they added a damage hitbox to the hand portion of the ranged fist attack. Okay, that's good. I didn't really get around to using the Golem Fist yet either, we're going to have to test that out. The Smith's Grip Great Hammer I did test out. They increased the poise damage of the swing portion of the throwing attacks. The projectile is unchanged. So now the heavy attack stuns and combos the entire way through if they are close to you. Really useful. The projectile still doesn't have the most poise damage though. The spread crossbow thankfully received a nerf. They decreased the generated status buildup when used with bolts that have status effect. So now I no longer get slept in one hit at least from the sleep crossbow. They also buffed all the status resistant talismans. I'm a huge fan of that. I don't like being slept or madness in team fights. I'd like to have a counter. We're now moving on to the skills, and they made another change to Savage Lion's Claw. I like how it wasn't paired with the earlier changes, but that's fine. They increased the attack power and poise damage of the first attack of the Ash. So because they nerfed the combo into the second part of it, they increased the initial part of the Ash, I suppose, making it do more damage and more poise damage. We also got some Swift Slash changes, much needed, and it still needs them in my opinion. I tested the changes and they say they reduced the distance when using the skill. If they did, it's not a huge change. You can still cover huge ground when charging the Ash. They also say they extended the recovery time, but I feel like I'm still able to spam it. They could definitely extend the recovery time some more. I feel like if they reduce the movement further and also extend the recovery time even more, it could be in a balanced place. Overhead Stance also received a buff. They increased the attack power against enemies, but not against other players, so not really a buff in PvP. Aspects of the Crucible also got a buff. They increased its attack power, and they increased the directional control as well as the amount of poise generated when using this skill. Rancor Slash also received a buff. They increased the attack power of the Vengeful Spirits, and they increased the stamina damage against guarding enemies. I'd honestly have to swap my build to see how much damage has been changed here, because I'm not really on a Dex Intelligence build at the moment. But even though I'm not, it does some decent damage. Revenger's Blade also received a buff. They increased the directional control for the follow-up attack after the strong attack. So you can actually change the direction once you initiate the heavy attack part of the follow-up. I think that's pretty useful. Before you were locked in place, it was hard to catch anybody going around you. Horn Calling and Horn Calling Storm also received a buff, but only against regular enemies, not in PvP. So no real changes to test there for the PvP side of things. Weed Cutter, however, received a speed boost, and that is useful in PvP because it allows it to roll catch consecutively now. The weapon already has amazing hyper armor. Now it actually has a really useful roll catch Ash of War. I'm really happy for this because I love this weapon. Ramina's Purification actually got buffed. It gets more poise when doing the Ash, which I think is very useful. Now it can't be stunned out as easily. Red Bear Hunt also got a buff. They increased its attack power and increased the poise value when using this skill. I actually didn't get around to testing a few of these upcoming ones, so that I didn't test out. Rancor Shot, which is the Ash of War for the Bone Bow, I believe, decreased the status buildup generation when used with arrows. That's huge. Repeating Fire got a damage adjustment because they increased the overall attack power of the weapon. Feeble Lord's Frenzied Flame, they reduced the frenzy status effect buildup against enemies on a torch that I don't know about or know its name. And Revenge of Night got a buff. They increased the poise damage and the attack power when the skill is used immediately after guarding against an enemy. On a dexterity build, it does a lot of damage. Lost was chunking me with this. We're now moving on to the spells. The first one to receive a buff is Glintblade Trio. They increased its overall attack power. And then we have Blades of Stone. They adjusted the attack power of the first, second, and third charge hit. And they also increased the overall attack power of the non-charged attack. So they increased the attack power of the first hit on the charged attack and reduced the attack power of the second and third hits. They also increased the attack range and attack speed, so it comes out pretty quickly. Glintstone Nail received an increase to its attack power and improved enemy tracking, and the same goes for the Glintstone Nails version. These do some pretty good damage when fully charged, I have to add. Impenetrable Thorn receives some changes as well. All the generated impenetrable thorns will now track enemies. They decrease the overall attack power and poise damage though, and they decrease the hemorrhage status buildup and stamina damage against guarding enemies. I noticed the damage wasn't too severe unless I was close to him. When I was close when he cast, it bled me instantly, but from a range it wasn't really doing that much damage or blood loss buildup compared. The tracking isn't really that bad either, but I'm able to strafe side to side to dodge it, which is nice. They increase the attack power and frostbite status buildup of both the Rings of Spectral Light and the Vortex of Putrescence. Honestly, these spells are cool. I feel like I prefer the Vortex of Putrescence though. We're now moving into the incantations, starting with the Minor Erd Tree. They buffed it to increase the amount of HP recovery it's going to have. I haven't really used this incantation prior to this change, so I'm not really sure how much more HP it grants you, but useful that we have another regen incantation. They also improved the enemy tracking on the Land of Shadow incantation. You can still strafe it, but you can see how it's tracking well. Spyro received an increase to its attack speed. It comes out very quickly now, and you can hold it. It tracks pretty well. Comes out quick. You can strafe it pretty easily though, just from the looks of this. Watchful Spirit got improved enemy tracking. I still wouldn't say it's the most useful, pretty easy to avoid. Divine Beast Tornado received an increase to its attack power, and enemies hit by the tornado are supposed to be launched upwards, but that doesn't seem to be happening, and the tornado will be less likely to disappear due to collision with the terrain. Rain of Fire actually got a buff. They increased its attack power, so now it actually does some damage over time, and they reduced the interval between each hit, so you're going to be hitting faster during the incantation cast when they're actually raining down. Aurora Brugalia actually got a buff to its poise damage and attack power, which is pretty scary because the range on this is terrifying at times. The Furious Blade of Ansbach also got an increase to its attack power. It's honestly a really cool looking incantation. I need to try that out. And finally, we got a buff to Rotten Butterflies. They increased the Scarlet Rot status buildup, they reduced the interval between damage ticks, and they increased the attack range. And even with all that, it's still not very good. Moving on to the bug fix tab, there is a ton of bug fixes. I'm not really going to read through every one of them, because some of them are small bug fixes, but I've noticed there's a few that I thought I should mention. One of the ones that I noticed is they fixed the bug that allows you to use arrows, great arrows, bolts, great bolts with things that it should not be able to use, like using a light bow to fire a great bolt or great arrow. So that bug's been fixed. I've also heard that the chainsaw glitch has been patched, and I can't really seem to find where it's addressed in the bug fix section. Unless this is what's addressing it, where they say fix the bug that caused certain skills to perform differently than expected under certain circumstances. But I have seen videos addressing it, and it looks like the chainsaw glitch no longer works, so that's good news. So if you guys are interested in seeing what has been changed in the bug fixes, I'm going to have the link to the update below. I really just wanted to read through all the PvP changes and test them out in game for you guys, so I hope you enjoyed that. There were a lot of actual changes. I think that wraps up today's video. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me and reading through all of this. As always, if you guys have any recommendations on what weapon you'd like to see me showcase first after these updates, feel free to comment it below. I do appreciate all the input that you guys give. Until the next video, this is goodbye. I will see you all next time. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye. Goodbye.